Your soulmate's family couldn't stop talking about you. Here's why. Don't scroll, listen to this, because if this message found you today, there is a reason for it, and this message is for you because your heart needs this right now, especially if you have been wondering why your soulmate's energy feels so close lately, why memories seem stronger than usual, and why your intuition keeps telling you that something important is happening behind the scenes. Because heaven says there is a conversation that has been echoing through places you cannot see, a conversation that started quietly but became impossible to ignore, and strangely enough, it is centered around you, because your soulmate's family has noticed something they could not fully explain, something that kept bringing your name, your energy, and your memory back into discussions long after everyone expected those conversations to fade. And what makes this so significant is that they were not talking about you because someone told them to, they were talking about you because your presence left an impression that never completely disappeared. Don't scroll, because this gets deeper immediately. Your soulmate spent a long time trying to appear calm on the outside, trying to act as though everything was normal, trying to convince themselves that certain emotions were behind them, but heaven says people who know someone closely often notice things they cannot hide, and family members are especially sensitive to those changes, because they notice shifts in mood, they notice unusual silence. They notice when someone lights up while talking about a certain person, and they notice when a name keeps appearing even when nobody intends to bring it up, and what feels undeniable here is that your soulmate's family noticed something different whenever you became part of the conversation, because there was a warmth there, a spark there, and an emotional reaction there that stood out from everything else. Your heart needs this right now because many of you have wondered whether the people closest to your soulmate ever knew how much you meant to them, and heaven says they knew more than you realize, because even when your soulmate struggled to explain their feelings, the people around them were observing, listening, and connecting pieces of the story together, and over time they began noticing a pattern. Because your soulmate could talk about many things in life and then move on, but whenever the subject somehow found its way back to you, the energy changed, the attention changed, and the emotional weight changed, and those differences became impossible to ignore. Listen to this carefully, because this message is for you if you've been seeing angel numbers lately, especially 222, 444, or 777. Because spiritual signs often appear when hidden truths are beginning to surface, and what feels significant here is that your soulmate's family started asking questions they never asked before, questions about what happened, questions about why certain memories remained important, and questions about why your soulmate never seemed completely indifferent whenever your name entered the conversation. And heaven says those questions became more frequent as time passed because the emotional significance was becoming more obvious to everyone watching from the outside. Don't scroll, because here is where things become emotional. There were moments when your soulmate thought nobody noticed, moments when they believed they had hidden everything successfully, but family members often see through masks more easily than strangers do. And what feels clear here is that someone close to them quietly realized that you occupied a different place in their heart than other people did. Because your soulmate could move past other stories, move past other memories, and move past other situations, but when it came to you, there was always something unfinished in their energy, something reflective, something thoughtful, and something deeply personal. And heaven says those observations became topics of conversation more often than your soulmate would ever expect. Your heart needs this right now because some of you have felt invisible in this story, wondering if anyone ever understood your importance, but heaven says your impact was visible in ways you never saw, because the people closest to your soulmate witnessed changes connected to you, witnessed emotional growth connected to you, and witnessed lessons connected to you. And over time they started associating your presence with moments that clearly mattered, moments that influenced your soulmate in lasting ways. Don't scroll, because this gets even deeper. One of the biggest reasons your soulmate's family could not stop talking about you is because they noticed how often your soulmate compared new experiences to old memories involving you, not always directly, not always intentionally, but often enough to reveal a truth, because whenever something meaningful happened, there seemed to be a connection back to a lesson, a conversation, or a feeling associated with you, and heaven says those repeated patterns made people curious, because curiosity grows whenever something continues carrying significance long after it should have faded. Listen to this, because this message is for you, especially if you felt like your soulmate has been thinking about the past lately, because what I feel strongly here is reflection, deep reflection, and family members began noticing it too, because there were moments when your soulmate became unusually quiet, moments when certain topics triggered deeper thoughts, and moments when discussion somehow circled back toward you even when the original conversation had nothing to do with relationships at all, and heaven says those moments became impossible for others to overlook. Your heart needs this right now because there is a growing awareness around your soulmate that the connection left a permanent imprint, and what is fascinating is that the people around them may have recognized this before your soulmate fully admitted it to themselves, because outsiders sometimes see emotional truths more clearly than the people living through them. And heaven says someone close to your soulmate has quietly wondered for a long time whether you still think about them too. Because from their perspective, it became obvious that your memory never fully disappeared. Don't scroll, because here is the part your soul may need to hear most. The conversations were never really about gossip, they were about significance, because your soulmate's family kept returning to the subject of you for one simple reason. Your presence represented something meaningful in your soulmate's life, something transformative, something that changed them, taught them, challenged them, and helped shape who they became, and people notice transformations, especially the people who have known someone for years. Your heart needs this right now because some of you have been questioning whether the connection mattered as much as your intuition claimed it did, but heaven says there are people around your soulmate who have already seen evidence of the answer, because they witnessed the emotional reactions, witnessed the growth, witnessed the reflection, and witnessed the way your name carried a different energy than anyone else's. And that difference stayed visible long after everyone expected it to disappear. Listen to this carefully, because before this part ends, there is one final truth heaven wants you to hear tonight. Your soulmate's family could not stop talking about you because they were seeing the effects of a connection that never completely left your soulmate's heart, and while your soulmate spent years trying to understand certain feelings, the people closest to them were quietly noticing the signs all along, noticing the memories that remained, noticing the questions that remained, noticing the emotional weight that remained, and noticing that every road somehow seemed to lead back to the same person, you. And now, as new awareness begins rising inside your soulmate, those old conversations are taking on an entirely new meaning, because what others observed from the outside is finally becoming impossible for your soulmate to ignore from within. Listen to this, because the story goes much deeper than your soulmate's family simply remembering your name, and this message is for you because your heart needs this right now, especially if you have ever wondered what people saw when they looked at your soulmate during the moments they thought nobody was paying attention, because heaven says there were people around them quietly noticing things that your soulmate believed were invisible, people who watched their reactions, listened to their words, and observed the way their energy shifted whenever your name entered a conversation, and over time those observations became impossible to ignore, because the pattern kept repeating itself, and when a pattern repeats long enough, people start asking questions. Don't scroll, because this gets deeper tonight. Your soulmate may have tried to convince themselves that they had moved past certain emotions, but the people closest to them often noticed something different, because there is a unique look a person carries when they hear about someone who still matters to them, a subtle change in attention, a slight shift in energy, a pause that lasts just a little longer than expected. And heaven says your soulmate's family noticed those moments repeatedly. Noticed how conversations became more thoughtful, noticed how memories surfaced more easily, and noticed how certain subjects seemed to hold their attention in a way that other subjects simply did not, and eventually those observations turned into discussions among themselves. Your heart needs this right now because many of you have wondered whether your soulmate ever talked about you when you were not around, and what feels undeniable here is that they did, sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly, because not every mention was obvious, not every reference used your name, and not every memory sounded romantic, but heaven says there were enough stories, enough comparisons, enough reflections, and enough moments of emotional significance that the people closest to them began connecting the dots on their own, and what they saw was someone who carried your influence much longer than they realized. Listen to this carefully, because this message is for you if you've been seeing angel numbers like 111, 222, 444, or 555 lately, because spiritual signs often appear when hidden truths are beginning to reveal themselves. And what feels significant here is that your soulmate's family noticed something your soulmate often struggled to admit openly. You represented a turning point in their life, because after you entered their story, certain perspectives changed, certain lessons became clearer, and certain emotional patterns began shifting, and the people around them witnessed those changes firsthand. Don't scroll, because here is where things become even more emotional. There were moments when family members would bring you up unexpectedly, not because they were trying to create drama, but because they genuinely sensed your importance, because they remembered the stories, remembered the emotions, remembered the impact, and remembered the way your soulmate seemed different when discussing you. And heaven says sometimes those conversations happened years after the original events took place, because the significance remained visible long after the circumstances changed. Your heart needs this right now because some of you have felt as though your role in their life was forgotten, but heaven says your role became part of a larger story that the people closest to them continued recognizing, because every family has certain stories that get revisited over time, certain moments that stand out, and certain people who leave stronger impressions than others. And what feels undeniable here is that you became one of those lasting impressions, because the connection carried lessons and emotions that continued shaping your soulmate long after everyone expected those influences to fade. Don't scroll, because one of the biggest reasons your soulmate's family continued talking about you is because they noticed the contrast between how your soulmate spoke about you and how they spoke about other people, because with most connections there was a clear ending, a clear explanation, or a clear emotional conclusion, but when it came to you, there always seemed to be something deeper underneath the surface, something unresolved, something reflective, and something meaningful that never fully disappeared, and heaven says that difference became increasingly obvious over time. Listen to this, because this message is for you, especially if you've ever wondered whether someone in their family secretly hoped things would work out differently. Because what I feel strongly here is that at least one person close to your soulmate often sensed there was more to the story than what appeared on the surface, someone who quietly recognized the emotional significance long before your soulmate fully acknowledged it themselves. And heaven says this person often found themselves revisiting conversations, wondering about the connection, and questioning whether it was truly over in the emotional sense, because from their perspective, the energy never felt completely finished. Your heart needs this right now because there is a growing awareness among the people around your soulmate that the connection left a mark, not just on memories but on their development as a person, because they witnessed growth that emerged from lessons connected to you, witnessed changes in perspective that emerged from experiences connected to you, and witnessed emotional maturity that emerged through reflections connected to you. And heaven says people naturally talk about what influences someone they care about, especially when those influences continue shaping them years later. Don't scroll, because here is where things become even more significant. Your soulmate's family may not have understood every detail of the connection, but they understood the emotional impact, because emotional impact is often easier to observe than emotional explanations, and what they observed was someone who never became completely indifferent, someone who never fully erased the importance of the connection, and someone who continued carrying traces of it through different seasons of life. And heaven says that consistency became impossible for others to overlook. Your heart needs this right now because some of you have questioned whether your soulmate's feelings were ever visible to anyone else, but heaven says feelings often reveal themselves through patterns, and patterns reveal themselves through time, and over time the people closest to your soulmate began noticing that certain topics always seem to lead back to you, certain lessons always seem to connect back to you, and certain reflections always seem to involve you in some way, and those patterns spoke louder than words ever could. Listen to this carefully, because this message is for you if you've been feeling spiritually connected to this person lately, because what feels undeniable here is that the energy around the connection is becoming more active, and as your soulmate enters a deeper period of self-awareness, old conversations are beginning to make more sense, because the observations others made years ago are starting to align with realizations your soulmate is having now, and heaven says that alignment is creating a powerful sense of clarity. Don't scroll, because another major reason your soulmate's family could not stop talking about you is because they recognize that your memory survived things that usually erase memories, because time passed, circumstances changed, life moved forward, and yet your name, your influence, and your significance continued appearing in ways that felt unusual, and heaven says people notice when something remains important longer than expected, because enduring significance always captures attention. Your heart needs this right now because what is unfolding here feels less like coincidence and more like confirmation, confirmation that the connection mattered, confirmation that the impact was real, and confirmation that the emotional imprint remained visible not only to your soulmate but to people around them as well. Because sometimes others can see the evidence of a connection even when the people involved are still trying to understand it themselves. Listen to this, because this message is for you, especially if you've ever felt that your intuition knew something before your mind could explain it, because what feels significant here is that your intuition may have been sensing a truth all along, a truth that family members quietly recognized years ago, and that truth is simple. You were never just another chapter in your soulmate's story, because ordinary chapters close and fade, but meaningful chapters continue influencing the entire book, and heaven says the people closest to your soulmate have been witnessing that influence for much longer than anyone realizes. Don't scroll, because there is another layer to this revelation that heaven wants you to hear tonight, and it is this. Every conversation about you was really a reflection of something larger, because the reason your soulmate's family kept returning to your name was not because of curiosity alone, it was because they could see the emotional significance attached to it, and emotional significance always leaves traces, traces in stories, traces in memories, traces in personal growth, and traces in the way a person's energy changes when someone meaningful is mentioned, and heaven says those traces remained visible long after the connection should have become ordinary. Your heart needs this right now because before this part ends, heaven wants you to understand one powerful truth. Your soulmate's family could not stop talking about you because they witnessed the impact you left behind, they witnessed the lessons, they witnessed the changes, they witnessed the reflections, and they witnessed how your presence continued living inside conversations even after years had passed. And now, as your soulmate begins understanding more of their own heart, those observations are becoming impossible to dismiss, because what others recognized from the outside is slowly becoming the very truth your soulmate is finally recognizing from within. Listen to this, because you are about to hear the deepest part of this message, and this message is for you because your heart needs this right now, especially if you have ever wondered why your name continued living in conversations you never heard, why your energy seemed to linger in places you could not see, and why your intuition kept telling you that your impact on this person was far greater than anyone ever admitted. Because heaven says the reason your soulmate's family could not stop talking about you was never really about the past, it was about the evidence they continued seeing in the present, because year after year they watched your soulmate grow, change, mature, and evolve, yet somehow your influence remained part of the story, and that consistency became impossible to ignore. Don't scroll, because this gets even deeper. There comes a point when people stop discussing someone out of curiosity and start discussing them because they represent something meaningful, and heaven says that is exactly what happened here, because your soulmate's family eventually realized that your name carried a different energy than other names, your story carried a different weight than other stories, and your memory created a different emotional response than other memories, and those differences became impossible to dismiss as coincidence, because they continued appearing long after everyone expected them to disappear. Your heart needs this right now because many of you have spent years wondering whether anyone truly understood the connection, and what feels undeniable here is that there were people around your soulmate who understood more than they ever said out loud, because they observed things your soulmate could not hide, they noticed moments your soulmate thought went unnoticed, and they saw emotional reactions that revealed more truth than words ever could, and heaven says one of the greatest surprises waiting in this story is that others often recognized the significance of the connection before your soulmate fully accepted it themselves. Listen to this carefully, because this message is for you if you've been seeing angel numbers lately or feeling guided toward trust, because spiritual guidance often arrives when hidden truths are ready to be understood. And what feels significant here is that your soulmate's family often noticed how your name appeared during important conversations, conversations about the future, conversations about happiness, conversations about lessons learned, and conversations about personal growth, and every time those discussions happened, your presence seemed to remain connected to them in some way, because whether your soulmate intended it or not, the influence you left behind kept showing itself. Don't scroll, because here is where everything starts making sense. Your soulmate's family was not talking about you because they were obsessed with the connection, they were talking about you because they could see the effect of the connection, and effects are difficult to ignore when they continue shaping someone's life years later, because they watched your soulmate become more reflective, more self-aware, and more emotionally honest over time. And heaven says many of those changes were connected to lessons learned through experiences involving you, whether your soulmate openly acknowledged it or not. Your heart needs this right now because some of you have carried sadness believing that your role in their life was forgotten, but heaven says your role became part of the foundation of many important lessons, and foundations are not forgotten, because foundations support everything built afterward, and your soulmate's family could see those lessons unfolding, could see those changes developing, and could see that your presence remained woven into many of the reflections your soulmate continued having over the years. Listen to this, because this message is for you, especially if you've ever questioned whether your soulmate still carries your memory, because what feels undeniable here is that the people closest to them never fully believed your memory disappeared, because they saw too many signs, saw too many moments of reflection, saw too many emotional reactions, and saw too many conversations circle back toward you. And heaven says those observations quietly convinced them that the connection meant far more than your soulmate often admitted aloud. Don't scroll, because one of the most emotional truths in this entire message is that your soulmate's family often recognized a difference between moving forward and moving on, because while life continued moving forward, they noticed that certain feelings, certain lessons, and certain reflections connected to you never truly left, and heaven says that distinction became increasingly important, because people can continue living their lives while still carrying something meaningful in their hearts, and the people around your soulmate could see that reality more clearly than anyone realized. Your heart needs this right now because there is a growing awareness around this connection that what happened was never ordinary, because ordinary connections rarely continue influencing conversations years later, ordinary memories rarely continue creating emotional reactions years later, and ordinary experiences rarely continue shaping someone's growth years later. And heaven says the reason your soulmate's family kept returning to your name was because they sensed that the story carried a significance that extended beyond the visible circumstances. Listen to this carefully, because this message is for you if you've ever wondered whether someone secretly hoped the story was not over, because what I feel strongly here is that at least one person close to your soulmate often felt there was more beneath the surface than anyone openly discussed, someone who noticed how your soulmate changed when your name came up, someone who noticed how quickly certain memories returned, and someone who quietly questioned whether the emotional chapter was ever truly finished, because from their perspective the energy never completely settled into indifference. Don't scroll, because another powerful truth is emerging here, and it is this. Every conversation about you became a mirror reflecting something your soulmate still needed to understand, because each discussion highlighted another lesson, another memory, another emotional truth, and another reminder that the connection left a lasting imprint, and heaven says those reminders continued appearing because the significance never disappeared, it simply evolved into deeper forms of understanding over time. Your heart needs this right now because some of you have been searching for confirmation that your intuition was right, and heaven says the confirmation has been present in ways you never witnessed directly, because while you were questioning the importance of the connection, there were people around your soulmate quietly recognizing the evidence of its impact, recognizing the lessons it created, recognizing the growth it inspired, and recognizing the emotional significance that continued revealing itself through years of conversations and observations. Listen to this, because this message is for you, especially if you felt that something meaningful was happening behind the scenes all along, because what feels undeniable here is that your influence remained visible long after the chapter appeared to close, and that visibility is the very reason your soulmate's family could not stop talking about you, because every time they looked at your soulmate's journey, every time they reflected on their growth, and every time they considered the experiences that shaped them most deeply, your presence seemed to remain part of the story in a way that simply could not be ignored, and before this message comes to its final ending, heaven wants you to hear one last truth. Your soulmate's family could not stop talking about you because they were witnessing the lasting impact of a connection that changed something important inside your soulmate, and while your soulmate spent years learning, growing, reflecting, and slowly understanding their own heart, the people closest to them were quietly watching the evidence unfold, watching the lessons remain, watching the memories remain, watching the emotional significance remain, and watching your name continue carrying A weight that time never seemed to erase, and now, as greater awareness rises inside your soulmate, the truth that others observed from the outside is finally becoming clear on the inside as well. You were never just a passing chapter in their life, you became part of the story that helped shape who they eventually became, and that is why your memory continued living in conversations long after everyone expected it to fade.